If you could build like the NBA dream team back in the 90s, it's like they could go pick, here's the bar. It's Michael Jordan. It is Magic Johnson. It is, Charles Barkley, all those different people. But if you only look at the free agents, like, okay, well, all those people are on teams. So we can only pull from these people that are available. Put your bar at the sourcing level, not at the applicant level.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenley, and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today, we've got a great mic drop episode ahead of us, but before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show. Some days we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, while on other days we cover things like trending topics, items that recruiters are talking about or will be very soon and what those mean for them. Stop by every Tuesday for Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. Every once in a while, we open it up for Q&A. Listeners can drop in questions that they'd like to hear us take on, so send those over to us at podcast@loxo.co. And finally, like today, you'll hear a mic drop episode where Matt stops by and shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a few weeks now. We've done a few reschedules to make this happen, but the topic is it's interviewing, but it's not just like interviewing is hard enough, right? Not just for the interviewee, but for the interviewers as well. And that's why you often see things like the same questions being asked in every interview, like tell me a little bit about yourself, or tell me about a recent obstacle that you faced and how you overcame it. What's your biggest strength? Like some of those very generic questions, or sometimes you see interviewers go in the other direction and they try to come up with some of the really creative questions. How many marbles can you fit in your living room? It's like, I don't know. I came here to talk about marketing strategy, but hey, we can talk about marbles too. So today we're going to chat through not just like what are better questions that you should be asking candidates, but how do you hire the very best possible candidate and reduce the risk of making a mishire? So with that, we're going to get into the conversation with Matt. So Matt, welcome back.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, it's like you have I'll call it the stereotypical interview prep process. This is very generalized, but it's okay. What's the position we're hiring for? And come up with relevant questions. Tell me about your experience doing X. Tell me about a recent challenge you faced with Y, how you overcame it. What experience do you have working collaboratively with members from Z department? You're screened with those questions. You're often asked those again by HR or hiring manager, and then 1 to 3 more interviews, depending on the role, come following that. So you've said, you think there's a better way, and that's something that you're gonna talk us through today. It's not so much the questions, but what does the process include to get up to that point? So that's where I'm excited about this, because I know after this conversation, just what you and I've talked about before, like you will be able to walk away being more confident in the candidates that you pass along from this. So I'll stop talking now and let you get into the fun part of this.
All right, appreciate it, Sam. So just to preface this, I think I'd like to start with just kind of a quick story. Is one of my former companies, I remember our leadership team came in and said, based on the VC firm that was there and the board, that hiring, you can, no matter what, no matter who the hiring manager is, it can be no better than a coin flip, right? 50-50. And I always thought that was crazy to think about it that way. There's no possible way it's a coin flip. So other times, hiring and recruitment is a blend of part science, part art. But I personally think interviewing is actually the art component of it. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to kind of walk through what has worked well for me and how we built our team at Loxo, and what I've learned just heuristically over almost 20 years, probably interviewing over 1,000 candidates. So I've been fortunate, especially early stage, you have to hire lots of different candidates. So it's not just one department or one role. So failed a lot, learned a lot, but I'm going to share those with you all today. So I think what Sam talked about, the typical process, you always have to understand if is it corporate, are you mid-market, are you smaller company? But a lot of companies just do an interview screen, right? And it's almost like it's not very personable. And so through this approach, we'll talk a bit about the overall model, like the steps, and then we'll give some specifics to the actual interview questions that I think have worked really well. So, first of all, if we all think about it, in general, your interview, unless it's late stage interview process for a very high level, you have like an hour, right? Maybe even half an hour. How can you possibly get to know someone on a human level And how can you predict how they're going to perform by asking questions? It's crazy. So the fact that we're interviewing to hire somebody that quickly it doesn't even make sense. So what I do is try to be very strategic about it. But first of all, before you even worry about the candidates, you have to find the best mutual fit. Just like a marriage or a partnership, and it has to be mutual. So you have to know yourself, know your business, know the hiring manager, and importantly, like be truly introspective and honest, right? Because you can try to hire the very best people on the planet, but if your business is not going to be a good environment for them, and it's not a good fit for you or the organization, it'll never be a good fit or sustainable, right? So do that. I also, in my personal opinion, we talk about this a lot internally. When you interview candidates, you're going to love the candidate, right? Everyone always interviews someone like, we really like them. What do you guys think? We really like them. We want to make the offer. Well, of course, right? People put their best, foot forward on interviews, and it generally goes pretty well. So you have to be almost skeptical, and you also have to have a bar. Like, where's your bar? And I like to just say like 1 to 100, right? And how much are you willing to hold yourself to that bar when you really start, going through the interview process? So that's one. Understanding like the career stage and the role, and also the business fit is important too, because you can have an unbelievable candidate for early stage, but they're not great for later stage, right? Very mature organizations, they have, hired hundreds and hundreds of candidates in certain roles. And so they have a good persona type. Some use assessments and actually have them fill them out to predict if they'll be a good fit. But most businesses are not like that, nor should they be. So, but understanding that is important. And so you kind of like back test. People who perform well can kind of show you the trajectory of if they'll be a good fit in your business, right? Cultural intensity, I think, is really important. And people always talk about cultural fit, but it's almost especially competitive, high performing. A lot of the roles that our customer partners are recruiting for is like your professional recruiting. You're looking for incredible talent, right? Cultural intensity and matching that is a big part of things I think people miss a lot, and you can assess that out in the interview. And so the last thing is,
I want to stop on that one really quick. So talk about difference, like cultural fit is not cultural intensity. It's not, we have a ping pong table. Like, it's not that kind of thing. So let's define a little bit more cultural intensity, because I do think that is something that a lot of people can interpret in different ways. So I'm curious to hear your take on that specifically.
Well, and it's almost anecdotal, right? Everyone thinks that they have this, world-class culture, like, and you said ping pongs and it's fun and you're trying to attract candidates and we're laid back, but then you have jobs to be done and you have customers that are demanding and services you have to deliver, right? And so it just goes back to knowing yourself and who you are and what you represent and value system. But when it comes to the day-to-day and the honeymoon period wears off, you can't put in what God left out with people, and you can't constantly motivate. And a lot of managers are constantly like, what do I need to do to get this individual to be motivated? And so a lot of that intensity is just like the speed, the pace and velocity of your business, the day-to-day tasks, and the hiring manager, and, does it align? And that's also career stage, right? You don't want to throw an entry-level employee into a super high, fast pace without any training and onboarding. And so the intensity of the role and the style of the business and all that is really, really critical.
Okay. I like that. Yeah. Cause that matches with a number of different things. So you have, how fast is the industry moving in general? Cause that's one thing. Then that's going to mean customer client expectations. How fast or slow do they move? Which in turn, your business, how fast or slow does your product or service evolve? What's that mean with your product team, with your customer success team? There are a number of factors, and you can get a sense of, is it one of those, I know that everything's going to be met with red tape, decisions don't get made for 2 months, or it's, ship fast, break things, figure it out, learn and go. It all comes together. So I don't think many people really think about that when they do start to vet for candidates. So it's more, they just checking box for skills.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, the higher up in the org you are, and I've learned this a ton, and I listen to a ton of podcasts from other CEOs and executives that I'm inspired by and respect, and they share their lessons learned. But they're like, one mistake they often make is they don't hire or hold their leadership accountable enough. And they don't hold them accountable enough for KPIs, right? And then the KPIs roll downhill. So if you're a VP of sales and your team's responsible for a quota and they always miss it, Is that the account executive's fault, or is it the leadership, or is it the CEO? And so the intensity of those, you kind of help to set the stage, and you have a bar, you decide where you want to hold that, and you hold people accountable, and then they have to hold everyone else accountable, right? And so it's just depends on how, the cultural speed and intensity and the expectations.
I like that because you said the word accountable a few times in there. And I do think that is the core of this, because there's so many organizations where we have a goal. Oh, we missed it. It's okay. Try again next quarter. And then there's other ones where this is our goal. We're going to hit it. If you don't, we need to have a talk. And not that it's always bad, but it's like, what's going on? Do we need to do something different? Do we need to coach you? But that accountability, I think, is a huge part of it.
Yep.
Okay.
It is huge.
Interesting. All right. Let's let you get into the next part now.
Yeah. So that's when you start to, okay, so now we understand ourselves, our business, our bar. Hopefully we all try to be somewhat introspective, but then let's actually break down the job description. Before you get to that, instead of doing a job description, you'll break down and build a scorecard. But before you can build a scorecard, it's really important to kind of just think about the jobs to be done. Like, what are the specific tasks, and then also combination of the business outcomes that you need for that role, right? And so once you have that, now you're going to start to build the questions in a way that are going to build in a progression to give you the answers to fill in your scorecard. And so we'll get to that. And even it sounds complex, right? It's not. This should be very conversational. And you can even start with a very simple warm-up question. I think a lot of people start with that. Tell me about yourself and your career so far. So it puts the candidate at ease. It gets them to start talking, get them in a flow, and then you're going to get into the deeper stuff as you go, but in a progression.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so should we do a few examples of this? Like, we could pick, if you want to pick, let's do like an IC type role, individual contributor. Let's do some type of managerial role. And then if we want to do a third, if we have time, we can get into something maybe a little bit more technical.
Yeah. So let's go through, I'll go through a couple pretty concrete ones that everyone, regardless of your business, should understand. So I'll just stick on the sales track for a second. So let's go highest level, right? It's a very higher level VP of sales. So obviously, same thing. Tell me a bit about your background. Let them get warmed up. With the VP of sales, you're going to have more. It's a much higher risk, so you have to invest more time. You're not going to learn everything about each other in one meeting. So the first one is almost like a discovery in the sales process, but it's like, let's get to know each other. Is it worth having deeper discussions and really digging in, right? But some simple questions just to show you that, like a VP and an owner of more ownership of business units versus like an IC contributor sales rep, you would start with similar questions. So your understanding on paper, are we the right business stage, business fit? And the way you assess that out in a question would be tell me about the deal size that you've sold to, and on average, how much is that, right? One question you have to ask, because sales reps can be unbelievable at Oracle or a giant, they sell 2 deals a year and they fly out and they're, in the field, versus SaaS, high transactional sales, very different. So, but the deal size kind of tells you quite a bit in sales. But then as you continue to go, it's more about your acumen. And, if one of your most important aspects of your scorecard that you build is as a VP of sales, really the vast majority of your job tasks to be done are managing people all day, every day, and making them better and coaching. You really want to ask a lot of questions around that, and not just yes or no, but hey, tell me about the teams you've managed. How did you build them? What's your style of management? When I talk to candidate, or when I talk to, I'm going to talk to sales reps you've managed before. What are they going to tell me about you? And then circle back to how their management style was, right? So if that's a really important scorecard, and you don't want to pick too many because it's difficult, but really dig into those. Also, if you're higher level, you have to work across departments. So tell me about how sales and marketing work together. Tell me about lessons you've learned, or philosophies. So you're trying to get them to talk. You're trying to get people away from basically being able to provide answers that they can pump into GPT, right? Mm-hmm. It's what are the best answers for an interview for VP of sales? No, make it very conversational, throw them off their game, and just talk at a high level and really dig into the details and specifics. If people can't speak to specifics and you're forcing them to go back to them each time and they go high level, that either means that they don't know what they're doing. And I've made this mistake before, so I can speak to it. But you really do need to get into the details. Details matter.
Yeah, I like this. And the way that these questions are structured. So tell me about the teams you managed and how you built them, whether it's, you hear it from others, but say you know that you have a very junior sales team, they're going to need more coaching. Well, that's taking what you know about your company. And then if their skill set's very, hey, I'm pretty hands off, I just like teams that can go in and do it. I make sure that they've got the accounts they need, or I'm a player coach, I want to go and help sit on calls with them. That's where you're going to be able to map that to some of the things that we wrote out earlier, like what do you know about your company and your stage? Or the cross-departmental one, when you think about your business philosophy as a whole, like how do sales and marketing work together? So for example, here we share a revenue target combined, sales and marketing. We don't fight over attribution, anything like that. So if they are quick to bash and say like, oh, I hate working with marketing, they're the worst, they give us bad leads or anything, you're going to get a good sense quickly for how they're going to come into that initial relationship without even having to have the head of marketing or those other departments interview this individual for you.
Yeah, it's a great point, and you know that obviously from the marketing side of the fence, and it's you're starting to get to know how it'd be like working with that individual on a daily basis just through a few questions.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the managerial side. So let's go down to like the account executive. What would you be doing there after that first question about like the deal sizes?
Yeah. So from an IC perspective, it goes back to different roles, and again, business stage. Earlier, like startups, more companies, I personally try to identify and hire them for the next role because we're growing quickly. You want to help people have a good career trajectory and track. You're gonna ask some questions on like, can you do this job today? I like the 30, 90, 360. And you have candidates speak to like, what can I expect in the first 30 days, 90 days, 365, right? But other certain roles, sometimes they're not growing. So like an account executive, they're going to be there for a while. The sales professionals love selling. Most don't want to manage, some do. But like for this, really tactical type of question. So, and just really speaking, and almost like, like you're investigating, what was your quota? What was your average deal size? Like, how'd you do? How'd you rank against your last, your peers in your last companies? Like literally, how many reps were there? Why did you rank that way? Right. And so it's like, and don't worry about creating friction, right? It's important to ask these questions. And if they're not willing to answer them, or they kind of beat around the bush, start making excuses. We didn't have any leads and it was a difficult market. Well, did you cold call? Did you go outbound? Right. So you're just having conversations about it. And then one really great way for no matter what the role is if you just ask somebody, hey, just tell me about your day to day. And again, they're going to go high level. It's like, no, I mean, really, really low level. Like, if it takes 5 minutes, like, what do you do day to day? What's your process? Walk me through it. That question alone is going to give you so much insight for an IC. And so, like even for example, sales, like, did you have to do it all end to end? Did you just get leads fed to you? And then did you also like have one call and then you pull in, sales engineer, like to do the demo? And then pull in other resources in the company, because we don't, you might not have that in certain situations. Mm-hmm. If you're at Oracle, you do, right?
I like that, because you also hear what they're enthusiastic about and what they aren't, because their tone of voice and how they talk about those things is going to tell you without telling you, so to speak. So you can also know for your organization, you're going to have to do a lot of prospecting. If they're like, I had to make 50 calls a day, quickly going to know, okay, this person's not going to enjoy this. They're not going to be here long, or they're not going to be successful. So yeah, there's those little nuances as well that it all comes back together there. So that's fascinating. I like that. Okay.
There's other.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's other examples too. I just want to help everyone, regardless of the sector they're in. I've been, again, fortunate to recruit and hire and interview for all different roles. And it's not easy, right? This is why professional recruiting agencies and even retained search firms have specializations. Like, you get better and better and better at it. You interview a million people. You have certain questions you just understand in frameworks. That lowers the risk, right? But even those organizations need frameworks, right? And you need to follow this. But outside of those, in the average recruiter, if you want to expand outside of your domain, you can do it pretty quickly. And you just have to identify what we talked about earlier. Figure out the position first, the jobs to be done, the scorecard, and now you're moving into the person, right? And we'll talk a bit about this, but truly when you're interviewing and you're talking to that individual, look at their resume, look at their background before you talk to them and like figure them out and like literally like kind of predict where their weaknesses are. I love everyone's good, right? Or you wouldn't be talking to them. So what I like to do is kind of try to find the flags and the concerns I have. Like, gosh, here, they kind of been job hopping over here, or, their tenure is really short, but they worked at some really good companies. So let's dig into those, right? So when you're identifying your concerns or flags and you're understanding your cultural intensity and you're working backwards and saying, now I'm going to test this person and just kind of ask them those questions. So you could pick any example, but if it was like project managers or account managers, right? You're asking about their process. You're trying to get an understanding for their without, feeding them the answer. You're just going to ask like, tell me a bit about your day to day. Tell me about your process. How many clients can you manage? Was that comfortable? What did you like about the manager, right? They're going to just tell you all these answers. And then if you're like a designer or you deliver a product, essentially, you want the same type of thing. It's like, what aspect of that final product did you deliver? Did you do all of it? Are you a really good designer? Are you really good at strategy? And even sometimes ask them for examples if you can see that. So, it just depends. You have to really, really, truly tailor your interview for the specific role in the person. That's mission critical.
Yeah, I like this. I'm just slowly trying to take all of this in. So I've always found with myself, I'm going to selfishly ask this question. It's digging deeper can get hard if you're not always sure how do you further probe into something or how do you start to question that. So do you have a good way? I hate the term like double click into that, but it's like what's the concept of like the 5 whys? Is there something equivalent to that within recruiting and interviewing?
Yeah, there is. And there's a time and a place for everything to double click. And that's a great question. I'd like to actually answer that in the framework to get to it. So I like a framework. I like models because you can create consistency and test them and refine the models over time. And then you iterate on the model, make it better and better and better. So I'll show you the model and then I'll like double click on my concerns and the flags. And I double click on the jobs to be done in the business to make sure like, okay, even though they just told you it, if you're not confident and you don't see that matching up and aligning with their background and history, then I'm going to double click again. I'm going to ask them, I'm going to try to throw them off a little bit so they can circle back and like, just reaffirm like, okay, they actually do know what they're doing here and they're going to be successful in our environment. But the framework, just to summarize, so know yourself, your business, set a really high or set a bar where you want your bar and truly kind of say like, we're okay with 70s because this role's not mission critical. We like a laid back culture. We'd rather have a great person, or maybe, we want the highest possible and we're okay with working with jerks. We don't really care, right? Every business is a bit different, but then you build your scorecard. You start to break that down, the scorecard, into competencies. So like behavioral fit. So things like integrity, efficiency, aggressiveness, follow through, intelligence, attention to detail, persistence. Cultural fit. We talked about cultural fit and, is kind of combined with intensity, but also like positional fit, jobs to be done. Those are competencies. And now we're going to get into the last couple pieces. And I think this is really important. This is not just, again, like the interview questions. Interview questions will lead you to the answers that you need. But once you have everything you need, sourcing, in my opinion, is like pretty much one of the most important jobs to be done in recruitment. And the reason why is the way hiring's always been done is post jobs. You pray to God that post and pray, right? You're going to get great people. You screen the best 200 that apply. You hire the best one. Well, sourcing, if you do it right, a lot of people that don't do it right, they're just randomly sourcing on LinkedIn. They come across one decent candidate, reach out, they respond, yes, we got one. Huck them over to the hiring manager. They interview them. They all like them because interviews are great. They hire them. How do you know that was the very best possible, right? So if you source, you build your talent pool and pipeline. When you're doing that, it helps educate you on the available talent pool, and you compare and contrast the whole talent pool. And like, it takes time, but if you really truly care and want to try to hire the very best people, then you can kind of start to build pattern recognition on that role. You get a better understanding for like, the range, And it's like, okay, actually we had 100, really high bar for what we wanted, but based on the, jobs to be done and all that, there's a huge talent pool, and, you have more leverage going into it, different questions. But what we do then is we rank them in order on paper where we feel like, okay, these are our short list, and then reach out to the short list candidates first, because a lot are going to respond if you do your job right as a mutual fit. And you have an attractive environment to offer them a great role from where they are today. And then you spend all of your time interviewing the very best possible mutual fit before you waste everything else, right? So you've already done the strategy, you've already done the legwork. Now the interview is fun. It's like really fun, and it should be enjoyable for both parties. And it's like, you kind of are already, in my opinion, you're already willing to hire this candidate if they check and everything aligns with what you were expecting. So
I like that. So there's two different things that I'm curious about. One's kind of a point and one's a question. The first one is, you were talking about the bar that you set. And when you look at the traditional post and pray, I'll equate that to, it's like kind of like your free agent pool, so to speak. Like your bar is set at what's the best in the free agent pool look like. Whereas when you compare it to sourcing, you're looking at what's the best of like everyone that plays in this league. So to pull it over to like a sports analogy, it's, if you could build like the NBA dream team back in the 90s, it's like they could go pick. It's like, okay, here's the bar. It's Michael Jordan. It is Magic Johnson. It is, Charles Barkley, all those different people. But if you only look at the free agents, like, okay, well, all those people are on teams, so we can only pull from these people that are available. So that's where I like that you explained how it's put your bar at the sourcing level, not at the applicant level.
Yep. And that's also where the art of recruitment comes in too, is because if you're going for the Michael Jordans, I mean, everyone on the planet would love to, but Michael Jordan's only going to go to the Bulls, right? Only a certain company, but you can find the up and coming Michael Jordans. And if you have, your job as a recruiter is to go get those, company game changers in each role. That I think that's what, I mean, recruiters like to find the best mutual marriage for both people. But I think the best recruiters and search firms and, recruiters in general, they're passionate and they're excited that they alone can make a huge impact for the company by going to get a game changer and making the company and the team better because of that, right? That's what drives recruiters to do it over and over throughout their career.
Yeah, it's a huge impact. Final question, super technical. Within the scorecard, do you look at that as a binary like checkbox type thing, or are you doing it as, rank one, or score 1 to 5 within these different items?
I think search firms would be better equipped to answer that than I would, for sure. But for me, nothing's binary, because humans are complex. And so it's kind of nuanced every time, right? And that's okay. I think more than anything, it's on spectrums, right? But you have to give it some type of score in general. So there are, 1 to 10, there are 9, right? But it depends on who's filling that out. Everyone could be a 9 if you're just really generous, right? So it's nuanced.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. Well, this was fun. I like this conversation. So hopefully it's helpful for people. I know I already learned a ton just from having this conversation. So thank you as always for joining. Any last second things you want to add to this before I do my little wrap up spiel?
I might just throw out two quick ones that I think are super helpful that I wanted to share. So for anybody who hasn't ever come across the book Who, it's the A Method for Hiring by I don't know how to pronounce his name, John Smart, I think. If you haven't picked that book up before, please do. That was recommended to me by a top search firm CEO that I read when I was trying to really understand recruitment. Phenomenal, but it's all about top grading. And one of the best questions you can always ask, I always do, is when you tell candidates, it's like, okay, when I'm going to speak to your supervisor, what are they going to tell me about you? And they know you're going to do reference checks, right? And so they're honest, and you get a lot from that. But too many people waste questions on like, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses, right? Again, like the GPT, if GPT can pump out how to respond to this, you're not going to get much. So that's a good question to really dig into. And also for anybody that has ever come across Ikigai, it's this Japanese concept to find like career happiness. And so another question I love always asking, and I'm kind of fascinated by, is I would say, like, notwithstanding this interview, if you could describe your dream role at this point in your life, like what would you be doing if it felt like work versus play? And surprisingly, like, people will tell you. You would think that, like, you can tell when people are trying to go back to the GPT answer. They're like, well, I want to do this role for 2 years. I'll be patient. And one day I want to be a manager, one day, right? It's like, okay, that's like, truly, like, no, I don't care about this interview. When you're 50, right? You look back in your life. Do you want to run your own business? Do you want to just help people? Whatever it is. But you'll be surprised how much people will tell you about themselves. And from that, you can really understand where they're truly at their passion and what lights them up. And I think that's important in general as like a manager. Like, how can I help this person be fulfilled, be excited, be motivated? Because again, it goes back to the beginning. You can't inject somebody to be motivated. And if their role is hate it, you're going to get mediocre output, and it's going to be tough to manage them throughout time. So I think those are two quick tangents that I wanted to share too.
Yeah, well, those are great additions. I'm so glad that I cued you to add those in. So I'll grab a link to that book, and I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well if anyone wants to check that out. So, all right, Matt. Well, thank you as always. Final little spiel: Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. So you can find show notes in the description of your favorite podcast streaming platform. We also have it on our website, loxo.co/podcast. We do have full-up video episodes, so if you want to see Matt and I talk face-to-face about this, we have it on YouTube as well as our website, and we're always happy to answer questions. Send those over to us, podcast@loxo.co. So everyone, that was the show. That was a fun mic drop with Matt. Until next time.